She remembers the smell first. Cigarette smoke, stale bottles on the counter, the sharp sting of winter air leaking through broken window panes. Childhood wasn't laughter and cartoons. It was survival. It was addiction whispering through every wall. It was watching parents who loved her but loved the escape in a pipe more. She didn't blame them. She didn't know how to blame. She only learned how to endure. Most people grow up learning what's possible. She grew up learning what pain feels like when the world decides you don't get a fair start. She was little, barefoot on kitchen tiles, cold like November rain, watching as the refrigerator sat empty except for powdered milk and whatever the welfare check couldn't stretch to cover. Other kids at school complained about homework. She wondered if there would be heat at home that night or if the electricity company had finally given up on promises her parents never kept. There were moments when life tried to be normal. When her mother would sit at the small table, brushing her daughter's hair gently, eyes tired but full of a love deeper than any drug ever gave her. When her father, brilliant but broken, would speak about philosophy and the universe as if the world outside wasn't crumbling around them. Those moments were short. Reality always returned, pipes burning, needles whispering, neighbors watching with pity masked as concern, social workers stepping over beer cans while writing notes about risk and instability. Childhood innocence wasn't taken. It simply never had a chance to arrive. School became a luxury. Attendance came second to survival. She arrived hungry, clothes stained, hair tangled, weighed down by the kind of responsibilities no child should ever carry. Kids laughed. Teachers judged. In a world full of backpacks and lunchboxes, she was the girl who never had lunch money and never brought permission slips. Not because she was careless, but because she didn't have anyone to sign them, and on most nights she slept on floors while her parents searched the streets for their next high. But she kept going. She kept breathing. She learned early that sometimes strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, hidden, formed in the cracks life pushes you into. She watched her mother's health fall apart piece by piece, watched addiction steal memories, steal days, steal dreams. And then one night the world cracked open completely. Her mother, the only soft thing in a life full of hard edges, was gone. Cancer, starvation, exhaustion. The body can only fight so long when life gives it nothing but hurt. She stood in that hospital hallway, numb, while nurses whispered and family members who rarely visited suddenly wanted to talk about plans. Plans. As if grief had space to be organized. As if a 15-year-old girl could carry the weight of losing a parent and the weight of homelessness in the same breath. She walked out those doors with nowhere to go except forward. Forward into subway stations and church steps. Forward into nights spent counting ceiling cracks in homeless shelters. Forward into mornings brushing her teeth in public bathroom sinks. Watching businesswomen in suits adjust their hair in mirrors next to her. Never knowing the girl beside them hadn't slept in a bed. Sometimes she begged. Sometimes she scavenged. Sometimes she simply disappeared into the noise of the city, one forgotten teenager among thousands. There were days she didn't speak at all because speaking required energy and hope, and both were rare currency. But in the silence, a fire started to wake. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was defiance. Maybe it was the thought that if she didn't move now, she would drown in the same despair that took her mother. Whatever it was, it did not whisper. It roared. She stepped back into a school building like a soldier returning to a battlefield. She didn't have notebooks. She didn't have clean clothes. But she had something no textbook could teach. She had lived through the kind of lessons that bruise the soul but sharpen the mind. She raised her hand in class. She stayed late. She studied under streetlights when shelters turned her away. The city didn't give her a desk lamp or a quiet room. It gave her determination fueled by hunger, hunger for food, hunger for dignity, hunger for a life she had been told she didn't deserve. She went from failed grades to top marks not because life got easier, but because she refused to break. Teachers who once overlooked her now leaned in, stunned by the storm of potential they almost missed. She read every book she could find. She learned that courage doesn't always look like bravery. Sometimes it looks like showing up with tear-stained eyes and doing the work anyway. Sometimes it looks like holding textbooks while holding your emotions together with nothing but stubborn hope. She had no home, but she had purpose. And there is nothing more dangerous, nothing more unstoppable, than a young person who discovers purpose in the ruins of everything meant to destroy them. Her classmates talked about college tours and future careers. She talked to herself about survival, about not letting the world chew her up and spit her out like so many others forgotten by sidewalks and shelters. Faith didn't come from religion. It came from grit. From the knowledge that when you've already lost everything, there's nothing left to do except climb. And climb she did. One class, one test, one impossibly heavy day at a time. Yet even in the progress, the nights were still cold. Her backpack was still her pillow. The subway station was still home when shelters filled or felt too dangerous. Hunger still visited often, stealing sleep and patience. But hunger also reminded her that she was still here, still moving, still alive. And somewhere between exhaustion and ambition, it happened. The moment life finally whispered back, "I see you trying." A teacher handed her a newspaper. On the front page, a scholarship, full ride, New York Times, for a student who had overcome extraordinary hardship. The world suddenly had a crack in the darkness, a small golden line of possibility. She filled out the application not as a girl who had nothing, but as a young woman who had built something powerful from absolute zero. She turned tragedy into fuel, loss into purpose. And the day she received the call, the day they told her she wasn't just accepted but celebrated, she cried not because she had won, but because for the first time, she hadn't lost. Harvard. The word felt heavier than the duffel bag she carried everywhere. It felt like a doorway to a life she had only seen in dreams she rarely allowed herself to have. But destiny doesn't arrive wrapped in comfort. It arrives when you fight long enough to deserve it. And she had fought. Quietly, ferociously, alone, but no longer invisible. She packed her life, which fit into a single bag. She looked one last time at the subway platform that once held her at her lowest, and she stepped into a new world, a world that would one day know her not as the homeless girl, but as the woman who proved that circumstance is not destiny. That the human spirit, when cornered, can become unstoppable. This story isn't about Harvard. It's about the journey to reach a place people said she didn't belong. It's about the power of a young girl whose world tried to break her before she even began. And it's only the beginning. Harvard wasn't the happily ever after. It wasn't a magic door that erased the pain or silenced the memories of chilled subway nights or the sound of her mother's cough echoing through small, dim rooms. It was beautiful, intimidating, astonishing, and terrifying. Ivy-covered walls didn't make her forget the girl who once counted street lamps as stars. She stepped onto campus carrying one bag, one past, and one unbreakable promise to herself. I will not go backward. Her classmates arrived with suitcases, parents helping them unpack, futures secured by comfort and expectation. She arrived alone. No welcome committee. No warm dorm room smelling of laundry detergent and childhood safety. Just her, a key, a bed she wasn't used to claiming, and silence that felt heavier than a city street at 2 a.m. Freedom can be frightening when you've spent years trapped in survival mode. She walked the halls and listened to the accents, the confidence, the casual ease of people who had never been weighed down by hunger. They spoke about internships before they finished unpacking. They talked about vacations in countries she had only read about in donated library books. Some spoke like they were born ready for greatness. She spoke to herself in quiet determination, reminding her heart it belonged here too. Imposter syndrome doesn't whisper when you come from nothing. It screams. But she didn't run. She knew running wouldn't save her. She stayed. She sat in lecture halls where thoughts danced with power, where professors spoke about the world as if it could be shaped by human will. She listened. She absorbed. She sharpened her mind the way life had sharpened her soul. Eating in the dining hall felt like trespassing in the beginning. She stood holding a tray as if someone might come take it away. Free food. Food she didn't have to hide, save, ration. She took apples and bread rolls and tucked extras into her backpack, old instincts refusing to die overnight. Trauma doesn't disappear when opportunity arrives. It follows like a shadow until belief replaces fear. But belief is a muscle, and every day she strengthened it. She sat at long wooden study tables where students, fueled by caffeine and privilege, debated politics and philosophy. She had her own philosophy, that nothing is promised, and every page she turned, every assignment she completed, pushed her further away from the streets that once held her like a cruel parent. Sometimes she cried quietly while reading, not from sadness, but from overwhelm, from realizing she had outrun a life most people never survive. There were nights when the campus felt too quiet, when the silence reminded her of loss. She'd walk outside, breathe the cold air, feel the ground steady beneath her feet. On those nights, she remembered the subway tile beneath her body, the vibration of trains rattling her bones when she tried to sleep sitting up so she wouldn't appear vulnerable. Now she walked under old trees lit by lamplight, a student at Harvard, the kind of sentence that felt too impossible to speak without breaking into disbelief. She didn't waste the chance. She studied until dawn. She worked jobs, cafeteria shifts, tutoring, anything. Not because she needed to prove she belonged, but because work had always been her language. Hardship had forged discipline into her bones. While others feared failure, she feared returning to the life she fought to escape. Slowly, something remarkable happened. She found people who believed in her. Professors who saw her resilience as brilliance, not pity. Students who listened to her story and didn't recoil, they admired. Friends who didn't measure worth by background but by courage. She learned that belonging is not granted by birth. It is earned through presence, through truth, through time. Yet she never forgot the faces on subway platforms. The children she saw sleeping in shelters, the kids who never made it out. Success didn't erase empathy, it deepened it. She carried those invisible voices with her, the ones society didn't look at long enough to help. She vowed to someday become the person she needed as a child. Someone who sees, someone who doesn't turn away, someone who believes in broken things before they shine. One winter break. While others packed to go home, she stayed. Dorm lights dimmed, hallways emptied, laughter faded down stairwells. Holidays meant joy to others. To her, they meant remembering absences, remembering a mother who tried and failed, a father lost in addiction, a childhood stolen by circumstances she never chose. She sat on her dorm floor, books spread like armor, and whispered to herself that she was building a new legacy, one brick of effort at a time. Some nights she still woke up startled, half expecting subway announcements or the shuffle of shoes in a shelter. But instead she heard quiet, safe quiet, a rare quiet that once felt like a luxury but now felt like a promise. Healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in breaths, in pages turned, in mornings you wake up and realize you didn't have to fight to survive that day. And while she rose, her father spiraled further. Addiction held him like chains that love couldn't break. She visited him when she could, not because she was obligated, but because compassion does not fade in the hearts of the broken-born. She told him about her classes, her progress, her dreams. He listened with tired eyes, full of pride and regret, interwoven like threads of a tapestry he never learned to finish. People asked her how she did it. They wanted one answer, one quote, one trick, one spark. But the truth was not pretty or simple. She survived because she refused to surrender. She moved because stopping meant dying in the same invisible corner society loses thousands in every year. She fought not because she was fearless, but because fear taught her how precious life could be when you decide you deserve more than suffering. And then came graduation, a moment unimaginable once upon a time, when she washed her face in public sinks and slept in train stations. She walked across that stage not just as a student, but as a storm that survived its own destruction. The applause felt like the universe finally saying, "I saw you. I always saw you." Her diploma was not paper, it was armor. Proof that no beginning, no matter how dark, decides the ending unless we surrender the pen. But even as she held that diploma, she knew her story wasn't about Harvard. It never was. It was about every child who sleeps tonight without a safe place. Every teenager walking streets hoping for a miracle. Every soul told you can't by a world that refused to help them stand. Her journey had given her a voice, and she planned to use it. This wasn't the end. This was the becoming. Greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes it rises softly, like a dawn that nobody expected but everyone remembers. As she stepped into adulthood, she did not step into comfort. She stepped into responsibility, into purpose, into the uncomfortable truth that thousands of others were still standing where she once stood. Alone, hungry, invisible, dreaming with no ladder up. Fame came quietly. Then suddenly, interviews, articles, stages where she spoke her truth not like a polished celebrity, but like someone who had lived every bruise she described. Documentaries followed, camera crews eager to share the story of the girl who outran despair. Audiences cried, applauded, whispered to themselves that maybe, just maybe, they could survive their storms too. But she didn't crave applause. She didn't want pity wrapped as inspiration. She wanted impact, real, breathing, measurable change. So she rolled up sleeves that life had already tattered long ago, and she worked. She built programs for homeless youth. She visited shelters, schools, streets where kids looked at her with the tired eyes she once saw in mirrors. She sat with them, talked to them, saw them. She knew the language of the forgotten. She had lived every syllable. Motivational speaking became a platform, not a trophy. People listened because she never pretended the path was easy. She didn't speak about mindset from a mansion balcony. She spoke about survival from experience, from nights where hunger gnawed louder than dreams. She told young people that brilliance can bloom under broken ceilings, that success built from suffering is not weakness, it is forged steel. She could have run from her past. Instead, she honored it, carrying it like a compass, pointing toward every person who needed light. Not all wounds healed. Some stayed as quiet aches, reminders, scars turned into storylines, pain transformed into power. Healing is not forgetting. Healing is learning to walk forward without letting the past pull you back. Her father eventually drifted into the shadows of addiction, and when he died years later, she mourned not only the man he was, but the man he could have been in another world. She didn't curse him. Love doesn't always come wrapped in perfection. Sometimes it's fragile, damaged, trying, failing, trying again. She carried his memory gently. Trauma didn't kill her tenderness. It deepened it. She became proof that broken homes don't break everyone, but also a voice reminding society that it shouldn't take tragedy to earn opportunity. Too many children still sleep on concrete. Too many carry textbooks and trauma at the same time. And she vowed that as long as she breathed, she would keep fighting for them. Life rewarded her in ways poverty once forbade her to imagine. Education continued. Her voice grew global. She founded her own service organization. She received awards, but she never let them define her. The girl who was once invisible never needed shining objects to feel real. She had purpose. She had identity beyond pain. She had become the person she needed when she was young. And that is the rarest success of all. When she told her story, she always ended the same way. Not with triumph, but with truth. We don't get to choose where we start. We only choose whether we stay there. People think miracles are sudden, but sometimes miracles are slow battles fought in quiet corners, in hungry nights, in the grit of someone who refuses to vanish. She was not born into greatness. She built it. One exhausted, determined step at a time, and somewhere, in a subway station under flickering lights and tired commuters, a little girl once curled her knees to her chest and whispered to herself that life had to be bigger than this. Today, millions know she was right. Her journey carved a path through concrete, not for herself alone, but for every soul who dares to hope while holding nothing but heart, from homeless shelters to Harvard, from forgotten child to force of change. Her story is not just inspiration, it is a promise. No circumstance defines destiny unless we let it. No past can chain a future that chooses to rise. And sometimes the world doesn't create heroes. It forces them to become one. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a blueprint, proof that even in the darkest corners, a spark can survive long enough to become a sun. And for every child who is tired, hungry, unseen, unheard, her life whispers, keep going. Keep breathing, keep believing. Your chapter hasn't finished. You're just turning the page.